Hello, good day, and welcome to the Point 99 podcast. This is technically episode 6 of the 6th season, albeit there has been a bit of a lengthy intermission between this episode and episode 5. Yes, it has certainly been a while, and after a few stumbles, we've finally found our footing and we are back in the race. So, as always, I am your host and your running companion, whether that's during those long runs, while catching your breath between your interval sprints, or talking along to you throughout your tempo sessions. I answer to many names, but here, I'm Mr. Steve. The Point 99 podcast, however, well, it's a running podcast for every runner of all abilities. There's no pretentiousness, certainly no cliques, and we have no aims for grandeur through fakery. What you hear is what we are. Good, honest chat about everyday running by honest, everyday runners. The show's mission has, and it will always be, to help everyone along whatever path their journey with running is taking. That might be through relatable guests, unique and inspiring stories, shared experiences and lessons that are learned throughout all of it. Hopefully by sharing all of this with you, you'll feel inspired and motivated to do amazing things, smash goals, and be the best running version of you. As this is episode 6 in number only, I don't really want to go over ground that has already been trodden from the announcement or from the catch-up episode. If you want to hear anything about what the podcast holds going forward, tune into those if you haven't already. I am, however, a stickler for numbers in situations like this, so I want to get the season wrapped up with a nice numerical number bow up to episode 10, give it its finisher medal and then put it to rest. Thereafter, it's going to be episodic releases without the pressure of living up to seasons or series or anything like that. That way, if and when we need to take any breaks, it is just that, it's just a break, nothing more. Now being dutiful parent, I know how much pressure there can be week on, week out with trying to get something like the podcast out. So if I can pre-record or take a break and just see how things go and release them even sporadically sometimes, as long as you guys know roughly when they're coming out, it allows me a little bit more flexibility rather than taking such a large break in between times, just trying to get to grips with parenting, running, work, and then also having the podcast as well. But as the podcast stands, it is now going to be back to being a bit of an evolving beast. I'm still going to give a short digest on how my running has been going. That is the host's egotistical right after all, and we'll have plenty of guests. Nothing's changed since I covered any of that in the catch-up or announcement episodes. The indication that there might be a possible co-host or two, however, that's fallen through. The person I have in mind isn't necessarily keen at the moment, or they're not able to commit. I'm more than welcome for anyone who wants to approach me to potentially get involved. They might think that they're going to be a good fit. Get in the DMs, let me know, we can have a conversation and see if it'll fit. Even if it is just for a one-off episode, interviewing the guest of your choice, something along that lines. Back to the roots of the podcast where there's a little bit more genuine discussion and a more amateuristic approach to it. It doesn't sound so cut and dry all the time. It doesn't sound so scripted. It sounds genuine, unabashed, that side of things. Conversations between 2 or 3 people that are just everyday natural conversations. As the podcast has evolved and grown over the years, I've very much relied on half-baked scripts and a lot of notes, etc. Just to keep me on track so I don't fumble my way through too much and end up going tangential down one track that ends up being a dead end. So just like this, I do like to keep myself in check, and because I am on my own, I'm solo, I don't have someone keeping me in check, so I end up just rambling, and I don't want that to happen. So to have someone else beside me talking to me that's not the guest, that could be quite a good narrative to reintroduce to the podcast, like its formative days with Runnerman Steve. We'll just have to wait and see how things go. What I have done, however, and I'll be sharing it in this episode and the next half dozen episodes though, is that I've recorded a series of segments. They're covering topics that I think those of you who might be thinking about increasing your running distance, whether that be half marathon, marathon, or ultra, might find very beneficial. They're topics like electrolytes and sodium intake, buying into carbon shoes, training in zone 2, mindset, which was a recommendation from you guys, the listeners, or today's segment, carb loading. It's all items that were alien to me in concept when I first started running. I have a little bit more knowledge about now, but these segments have been researched, they've been scripted, and a lot of time and effort has been put on them. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying that they are amazing or anything, but I think that they'll be beneficial to introduce certain individuals into each of the topics and give them a little bit more base understanding about each and every one of them. That does, however, mean that some of the episodes might get a little bit longer, and ultimately they might become a 2 or 3 session job for some of you who are maybe running 5 to 10 kilometers and listening to the podcast, or for other people doing long runs, it might help see you through the full long run. But I really wanted to add something fresh into the mix that people could really take something away from. If once the segments are all out, you guys decide you'd rather just have the guest chat a little bit about myself, we can always go back to that. Or if anyone had felt that the segments that are going to be released are beneficial and you want to hear more, you can make suggestions. I'll do some more research, I'll do some more writing, and we can get some new topics put up afterwards. We just have to wait and see once they're released what you guys think about those. And then finally on those segments, if they are beneficial, I can cut them out of the main podcast and upload them individually to something like YouTube or something, where you can just listen to the topic on its own without the rest of the episode multiple times if necessary to get as much from it as possible. Today, however, there's no guest chat. I'm pre-recording this episode, and hopefully in the next episode I'm going to have a fantastic guest. But with the Scottish election coming up, I thought it was important not only to get the podcast up, but to do a little bit of pre-recording just so it gets the ball rolling. So today it is just a little bit about how my running has been going, how training's been going this year, reintroduce myself a little bit maybe, but then also add in that segment that we covered there or mentioned, the carb loading segment, and it's going to be a nice, neat episode. So to look at my running, I haven't run an event this year so far. I've been training pretty religiously, week on, week out, been doing a minimum distance of, I'd say around about 50 kilometers a week. Now that's quite tame compared to some individuals, but it is actually quite high in the weekly turnover. It's probably comparable to someone who's in marathon training. Now, I was in marathon training for an event called the Murray Marathon, which was running around the perimeter and local villages in and around a place called Elgin in the north of Scotland, kind of in the Murray area towards Aberdeenshire. But Storm Dave kind of put a bit of a halt to that for me. As many of my fellow UK residents will know, the UK as a whole has been quite turbulent with its weather conditions recently. There's been a lot of sun, a lot of heat, then almost with a snap of the fingers, there's been hailstones, there's been snow, heavy rain, flooding. It hasn't really been in keeping with the season, I would say. Sure, we're used to getting lambing snow as it's called, but it has been a little bit bizarre. But with that being said, when the storm came, it was forecast. The event decided it wasn't going to defer or cancel like many other events did that weekend, and it was Easter weekend. So it was a busy weekend for me. The event in proximity is about an hour and a half away from me. I wasn't confident when I got up at 4 a.m. going for an hour and a half drive to hit registration when it opened at 6:30 in the morning to then run a marathon at 8 o'clock. not knowing whether it was being cancelled last minute or not. The event organizer hadn't put anything up to say that they were going to think about cancelling. They were very confident that the event was going to be undisrupted by any of the weather, that it was somehow in some bubble, that it wasn't going to be affected at all. And in reality, when the event rolled around, it did get hit with quite heavy gusting winds, crosswinds, tailwinds, and headwinds. The people I know that took part, they did enjoy it, but they did say if they had to travel any significant distance, they wouldn't have bothered. It was mostly locals that kind of stuck around, or people who had already travelled in the days leading up to the event. But like I say, for me, getting up at 4 a.m, then getting into the car, driving for an hour and a half, not to know if it was taking part or not, it was a bit of a no-brainer at that point. I did lose a little bit of motivation, not in myself, but I was a little bit disappointed at the event organizer. They didn't give anyone the opportunity to defer their entry. It was in the terms and conditions from the get-go when I signed up that there was no swapping of places, no trading, and there was no deferral. No matter what, no matter weather conditions or anything. Now, I think that's a little bit unfair for safety grounds, and I would have thought their insurance may have also said that too. I haven't contacted them to kind of state that. I don't know what their stance is, but I suspect they wouldn't entertain it. I'm not slagging them off. I know the event organizer is a smaller event organizer, and they do produce some fantastic events in the Highland area. I've had friends and family that have run at several of their events in the past, and they speak highly of them. It's just on this particular occasion, I think they could have handled it better. Now, we've had podcast friends absolutely slate people like the Edinburgh Marathon for certain things that have happened. So I think it's only fair that smaller events also get a similar treatment where it is due, that they could have used their foresight to potentially add in a kind of escape for people who didn't feel comfortable traveling and who still wanted to take part in the event. Anyway, that aside, I wasn't frustrated in myself. I was frustrated at the organizer, but I still got out that weekend on that particular day, and I still ran 30k at quite a good pace, might I add. I did consider going the full marathon distance, but anyone who solo runs will be able to tell you it's a very difficult thing to do, to push yourself at the particular speed I was going at on your own, in the snow, in the rain, in the wind. It was a very mixed bag day. There was tailwind, there was headwind, and I could have kept going. But being that I'd fueled at 4 a.m, gone back to my bed, got up and gone for a run at 10 a.m, I'd forgotten that I hadn't necessarily fueled properly to do a marathon push on my own anyway. So I used my better judgment and did 30k at quite a good pace and called it quits there. What it did indicate, though, is when I am comfortable to push myself at marathon distance again, I am very confident at hitting a sub 3:30. The original plan for this event wasn't for a personal best. I was meant to be pacing for someone for 4 hours. They unfortunately had to pull out, and then my plan changed last minute to potentially pushing for a PB, but I know that I have the fitness there and the ability. So in the future, if I keep my fitness level up, I think I can easily get a sub 3:30, but we'll just have to see. Time will tell. I'm not going to count my chickens before they're hatched. Otherwise, I have, as I say, been training pretty religiously, 50k a week for the last, how many weeks? Since the 1st of January. I've done at least a half marathon every week, which is maybe a bit over the top, and some weeks I've done 2. So I've done more half marathons this year than I have done any other year. And in a overall kind of total, sure, I am down on those that are training for ultras at the moment, but I think I've done in the region of 700 to 800 kilometers so far this year. And that's with runs that are logged on Strava and ones that aren't. That is far beyond anything that I would have ever done by this stage any other year. But like I say, I'm hitting the gym as well. I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling confident. I'm not letting things get to me. I think, quite a good mindset and outlook on it. And I hope that's getting conveyed with the way I'm talking as well. I just I'm trying to keep positive about it all. I also am trying to show a good impression to my wee boy. Although he's so small, it probably doesn't really matter to him. He's not necessarily picking up on it, but I want to show that you can have a good balance of life. You can work, you can have family time, and you can do fitness, and just generally tick along and be happy and healthy. But with other events, I do have an ultra, and this is why I'm recording ahead of time as well. Is not only do I have the Scottish parliamentary election coming up, which is going to eat up a lot of my time, which is also going to eat up a lot of my training time. I do have the Ultra X 50 kilometre, and that's from a little town called Fort Augustus, running the length of Loch Ness, but it's not like the Loch Ness Marathon. There is a lot more elevation change in this. You've got to go up quite a significant climb just to come back down again, go back up again, and then come back down again. If you look up the route map, it is pretty hard going. Not the worst out there, but it's going to be a good experience for me, a first for me, and a first A to B ultra for me as well. So at the time of recording, that is about 2.5 weeks away. So I don't know what to think at the moment. I'm looking forward to it. I just know, again, it's going to be a very early morning, very early start, but I'm looking forward to getting across the start line and certainly looking forward to getting across the finishing line. Thereafter, my training then changes to, and I think it's about a month and a half to 2 months' times, having a duathlon, a local one called the Highland Cross. Now, it's a charity event to raise money for local charities, but also the rescue helicopters that do an amazing job rescuing walkers and runners in the mountains throughout the Highlands of Scotland. So I have a team that I'm running that with, the individual that I was meant to run the Murray Marathon with, and a friend of hers. So it's a team of 3. We don't have to stick together. I can take off if I want, or I can take part with them, but we'll see how things go, how training goes. That as an event is a 20-mile run with quite a lot of elevation, and then a 30-mile cycle. It's going to be a bit alien to me. Getting back on the bike will be great though. We'll just have to wait and see how things go. Again, looking forward to taking part. It's usually very good weather, very midgy hit as well, though I think. So we'll see. We'll see. A lot of suntan lotion and Skin So Soft, I think, just to see me through that one. And then finally, I don't have any other event planned between the Highland Cross and my big event this year, my main event, which is a couple of days before my 40th birthday. And the main reason why I'm training so hard already is the Glasgow to Edinburgh Ultra. Thankfully, I know a good half dozen individuals who have taken part in the past who I can hoover up a lot of information about it from, but also people who are taking part this year as well. It's going to be a very big shock to the system. I have never done anything nearly as long as that. It's 96 kilometers. It's a marathon on top of an ultra. It's going to be hard going, but I'm looking forward to it. I just need to learn to slow down a little bit, get used to the ultra life, and just see how things go. I just want to prove to myself, though, this year that I am capable of doing something extraordinary. Of course, I am part of the 1% club, or even it's lower than that, isn't it? But I've run a marathon, I've run several marathons. I just want to prove to myself that I am capable of doing something extraordinary that very few people else in the world are ever going to do, and become a little bit more elitist in my club of finishers, I suppose. I might try fit in another ultra in between times just to kind of see myself over. I will take a little bit of a rest though, so I'm not just burning myself out before the event even gets here. There won't be any half marathons, at least competitive half marathons or marathons though, I don't think, in between now and then. The Loch Ness Marathon is 3 weeks before Glasgow to Edinburgh. I did contemplate the idea of maybe running that as a final long run, but I don't know if it's worth the risk. We'll just have to evaluate as the year goes on. I'm never going to say never, but it's maybe one to come and revisit at a later stage. But I also think for like half marathons, 10Ks, 5Ks, I don't really like paying for those anymore, given the fact that I am running a 10K every other day and I'm running a half marathon every weekend. unless I'm pushing for a personal best where I need other people around me who can push me and drive me to get amazing times and have amazing successes and achievements, I'm not going to pay an event to do that unless they approach me or I have someone I know who's taken part and I want to help them achieve their goal. Because as much as I want to get my own personal best, I do really love helping other people smash their own goals and break through barriers that they don't think are possible. I think it's so rewarding to do that. And I am looking forward to doing more of that, train more people, just generally be sociable and be friendly and be part of a community. I don't know, there's maybe going to be more to that, but I'm waffling. But to recap, yes, I've got the Ultra X50 in, I don't know, maybe a week's time from this recording when it's getting released. It might actually be the week of it being released. And then it's the Highland Cross and the Glasgow to Edinburgh. But hopefully there will be something in between times as well. So if you've got any recommendations or you're taking part in another event that you think would fit in well for me in between, let me know. I'm excited to hear what you guys think and maybe try to fit something else in. But other than that, going back to life as a whole, life's been really good. I don't know whether I've mentioned it in the last couple of catch-up episodes. Probably did. Sorry if I have. But I have, since hitting pause on the podcast, I've changed jobs. I'm now much happier. I still work for the same organization. I'm just using my skills and expertise in a different way and having a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more of an adventurous side about it, and really just loving life with work. The elections, like I say, are coming back up again. It's just something I'm going to dip my toe in from time to time now. I'm not full time with them, which does give me a little bit more freedom and flexibility with the family, enjoying family life and spending a lot of time at the weekends with both my wife and my son and my dog, just going for long walks, seeing him change on a daily basis and the character that he's becoming. And then also seeing him getting into just swimming and running around the garden, and hopefully praying that anything that I do will rub off a little bit and he'll be a little adventurer, get into running, maybe cycling. But I'm not going to push him into that. He's still too young anyway. But it's just parental things, I suppose, stuff that I wouldn't have even thought about when I first started the podcast. And it all kind of reminds me of recording with Runnerman Steve and him apologizing all the time because his daughter was talking to him and she was so young at the time. And I just know that might happen to me. But it's all positive. I'm loving it and I'm looking forward to seeing how things go. Before we get on to the segment, which I'm going to slot into the edit in just a minute or so, I do want to say a big thank you to everyone who had been dropping into the DMs, both on the podcast and to myself, reaching out, asking when the podcast was coming back, showing a lot of support and admiration for everything. And this was just not only past guests, but regular listeners and one or two people that I didn't actually know listened either. It was all very humbling to hear so many positive things being said about how much help the podcast has been to various people across the spectrum over its duration. If anything, it kind of made me feel a little bit bad even cancelling when I did, or at least putting pause and then releasing that the podcast was being cancelled without really giving it much time and consideration as to could I make it work. I know in my day life it has helped me so much with my public speaking and my confidence, more than I ever thought it would. So I don't know why I'm surprised that having episodes available to people around the world covering topics and having interviews with amazing individuals, I maybe wasn't as aware of how beneficial that could be to other people, rather than just as a time gap, a kind of time filler for me, as something to do. So it was a very, very nice thing to have all these messages coming in, and it really did give the big push to bring it back. So I want to thank you all for your support throughout the time off, and hopefully we can continue bringing in the amazing conversations, guests that you guys want to listen to, and just generally continuous things where I'm never going to be about numbers or statistics. I'm not looking for fame out of this. I just want to have honest, genuine chats with amazing people, sharing it with you guys, amazing listeners. And hopefully we can make that happen. And the only reason I'm saying this now is because I know once the segment's done, the likelihood is you're probably going to turn off and not listen to the outro. So yeah, hopefully that was worthwhile. Yeah, we're going to move on to the segment now and be less awkward. Right, let's talk about preparing for your first marathon. Now, I appreciate that for a lot of the long-time listener base, it is likely redundant information here, seeing as most of you have either run several marathons or ultras by now. But I also wanted to create a piece that, if deemed sensible and informative, could be shared with prospective new listeners in order to aid their personal marathon preparation journey. So the topic for this segment is going to be primarily carb loading. If you've never tackled a marathon before, there is going to come a day or a time where you likely start to think along the lines of, do I just eat 14 bowls of pasta and hope for the best? Of course, the short answer is no, and the long answer is no, but I can at least put a bit more structure around why the answer is no. The first thing we need to address is the term carb loading, especially for those who might have been like I was before my first marathon. Carb loading is essentially the process of topping up your body's glycogen stores, which serves as the primary quick release storage for glucose. It's stored in your muscles and is created primarily by breaking down carbohydrates to give you energy during exercise or to maintain blood sugar levels. That is at least the basics of it anyway. It's a lot more complicated than I could ever wrap my head around myself, but it is essentially the part that matters the most to know. Glycogen, or the released glucose, is the primary fuel source your body is going to call upon during your marathon, which is why you need to make sure to carb load effectively during the lead up to the event while also fueling effectively during the run itself. What you have likely heard, though, is the term hitting the wall. Again, in a basic explanation, hitting the wall is when your body runs out of the fuel it needs to keep those muscles pumping, and likely the moment you'll start to really question your life's choices, usually around about mile 20. Carb loading is, simply put, the best way to delay the inevitable, to delay hitting the wall, or actually avoid it altogether. It isn't necessarily about eating as much food as possible, it's about increasing the proportion of carbohydrates in your diet for the week or 3 days before the event. Now, there are a lot of sources out there that say you don't need to worry about carb loading for the whole week, with the sweet spot being that 3 days or 36 to 72 hours before race day. But for me, I find it easier to start the week as I mean to progress, really to make sure that I don't start loading too late and that I give myself enough time to carb load effectively. Now, that might be rightly or wrongly, but that's what works for me. With that being said, with most but not all marathons taking place on a Sunday, you're going to want to start thinking about prioritizing your carb loading, your meals for at least Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But it is important to mention the psychological side of carb loading, especially for first timers, as it can sometimes become a source of stress. You can easily start asking yourself if you have eaten enough, if you've eaten too much, or you could just stress about messing it up. But truthfully, if you've trained properly, if you've tapered well, and if you've eaten sensibly, you are likely already 95% of the way there. Carb loading, as much as it is important, is in the marginal gains territory compared to training consistently, pacing strategy, or even race day fueling. By now, you've likely started to ask yourself or ask me how much carbs we're talking about when we are worrying about carb loading. Now, the typical recommendation, and this is what I found online, is that you should try and get at least 8 to 13 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day for those 3 days before you race. To use myself as an example here, My current weight is 83.8 kilograms, or just above 13 stone. The simple maths of the 8 to 13 grams per kilogram is to multiply my total weight by either 8 or 13, and that will give the upper and lower end total grams per carbs per day. 8 grams per kilogram would work out at 670.4 grams of carbs, with the 13 gram total being 1089.4 grams of carbs. The sweet spot for most everyday level of runner is, however, going to be somewhere in the middle, just so you can consume the amount recommended comfortably, especially if your goal is to finish more than chase a particular time. But how do you practically achieve your carb loading intake? Well, that's easy enough to explain. Increase the carb content of your meals rather than increasing the size of your meals. Especially in your final week before marathon, you're going to have a much lower training load, since you should by this point be tapering, meaning you're going to be using a lot less of your energy stores. That doesn't, however, mean that you stop running altogether. You just take it a lot easier. You take your foot off the gas and decrease your weekly distance or your weekly load. It isn't even like we're talking about doubling your calories either. You're simply wanting to target an increase of carbohydrates, keeping your protein intake steady while perhaps dropping your fat and fiber intake just a little bit. Think rice, pasta, potatoes, breads, bagels, oats, pancakes, cereal, fruit, etc. Personally, for me, I love nothing more than a toasted bagel with peanut butter, although I suppose peanut butter is fat, as a supper before bed when I'm carb loading, with a nice bowl of porridge in the morning, packing out the rest of the day with rices, breads, and pizza. But again, cheese is fatty, and we'll get round to why we want to try and avoid fats. Well, as some of you may remember, you may not have heard this story if you're new to the podcast, but I had a bit of a trial of it during my second Edinburgh Marathon after having a lot of cheese and dairy alongside other items, which are pretty much just fats. And yeah, high fiber might be good for your all-round health, but before a marathon, fiber and fat, not so good. They can easily have you running a much faster marathon for all the wrong reasons, less pleasant and potentially a more Paula Radcliffe type moment reason. Although I didn't have that myself, it's maybe best to avoid so much fibers and fats just in case you come a cropper like I did. I have subsequently, post Edinburgh situation, done a little bit of reading on the topic, and I knew that fiber increased bodily movement, but I also didn't really realize that it sits in your gut for quite a while and it can cause as much bloating as it can cause. So all in all, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster. So like I say, maybe try and cut the fiber back just a little bit, and also the fats that kind of grease the wheels, so to speak. But to make sure you're not carb loading fiber, it's pretty much substituting the likes of brown rice to white rice, wholemeal pasta to white pasta, and seeded bread to white bread, just for that week to 3 days at least. If, however, you haven't really had a carb-focused diet before, there's no harm in giving yourself a bit more time to prepare and trial different things a few weeks before the lead up to find out what works and what doesn't work for you. The best opportunity would be around your long runs with pre-run breakfasts or meals with carb-centric intake. It all comes back around to that don't try anything new on race day mentality, but it's more not trying something new on race week. Trial and test to find out what is best for you, because at the end of the day, only you can figure out what is best, really. I could give you recommendations. You could read recommendations online. You could see some amazing TikTok super carb recipe, but only you can figure out what is best for you with trial and error effectively. That also goes hand in hand with not trying new gels or energy supplements in your water that week. The best way to prepare is going to be to prepare in advance so you're not caught out or wiped out by any unforeseen last minute hiccups, at least associated with food or supplements on the week of the race. Here is something though that I wasn't necessarily aware of before my first marathon, or at least my first couple of marathons, so I imagine it might be news to some of you too, that carbs bind with water in your body. For every gram of glycogen stored, your body is going to hold on to X amount of water. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that figure is, but it does mean, and this is the part that I knew, but not for this reason, you might gain weight before the race day, around about 2 kilograms. Now, that's not fat, it is fuel. So if someone mistakenly says to you, now I'd hope that they wouldn't, that you've gained weight before your run, you can just tell them that you haven't gained weight, it is just fuel. It is something to be aware of. Your body might change a little in the lead up to the marathon, but it's not a bad thing. Considering how much fuel it would take to drive 26 miles, let alone run it, it's kind of inevitable that your body's going to have to change just that little bit to accommodate all that extra fuel you're going to be carrying. You will, however, be a different figure when you cross the finishing line, that's for sure, after you've burnt all the fuel away. Essentially though, you want to stay hydrated, but be aware of overhydration. It can be just as problematic as underhydration. Again, it's about being in tune with your own body and what is the right litre intake for you. Regular hydration, making sure that it's a nice mellow yellow is always going to be the best approach. Okay, let's move on to some of the what not to do scenarios. And what better place to start than, say, the race organiser hosting a pasta party the night before the event. It doesn't mean that you have to go to town and down a few plates of pasta, just like you did with the shots back in the day. Bulky meals can lead to disrupted sleep, excessive bloating, and ultimately make you feel heavy and sluggish. It's just common sense at the end of the day. If you spread the load across the day, you're going to have a much better time than if you pack in as much food as possible in one sitting. In the same vein, storing extra fat to use as energy is not the way to think about things either. Fat metabolism is a long-term solution where you're needing a short-term one. If you were doing a multi-day ultra, I might suggest otherwise, but you're not a bear going into hibernation for the winter, you're a leopard ready to chase gazelles, so you kind of need that quick release boost rather than that slow burn. The biggest and likely most common mistake is leaving your carb loading to the last minute, say the night before, with one massive pasta or pizza dinner. That's not carb loading, that is just asking for trouble. No matter how busy your schedule is, be it work or home life, you can always make time for proper carb loading, just like you made the time for running in your weekly long run. And yeah, like I mentioned before, try not to panic about looking puffy, feeling slightly heavier, or feeling a little bit flat during your shakedown runs. It's completely normal. You can feel a little bit dull on race day, but that doesn't mean that you've ruined anything. Your body will soon come to life before you know it on race day if you're feeling any of those side effects. And now we are moving towards the end game. What should you eat on the morning of the race? Recommendations would have you again aim towards a gram intake per kilogram of body weight, or in this case 1 to 4 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, 2 to 4 hours before the race. With most marathons being fairly early in the day, it does mean that you have to get up even earlier, and I know that's going to be a challenge for some non-morning people. But again, it's about practicing those early mornings and the lead up those weeks in advance, just to make sure that you are ready and able to commit to that on race day. With your food intake, though, realistically, it's going to be something that's packed with carbohydrates, but also light enough. Something like a bagel with jam, maybe some porridge, some toast, pancakes, a banana, those sorts of things. You can also have a bit of fruit juice on the side, or if you're like me and you're a coffee person, have a coffee. Black coffee works for me. But if you're not really a coffee person, don't just take it because I've said so, because it does have side effects. Take it because you know it works for you. And again, the key rule is always going to be what I keep saying: eat what you've practiced, but you just want to do it a little bit earlier than you would normally to make sure that you've digested it, and you never experiment on race day. The same can also be said for in-race fueling, as carb loading helps you to start on a full tank. I've mentioned it already, but fueling during the marathon is just as important, if not more so, than carb loading, as it can help top up your energy stores as you burn through your glycogen. As with most of this, you should really practice it in advance. And I know I've said that a few times, but the best time to do it is always going to be on your long runs, testing out what gels work for you or the energy chews. And the intake you're kind of talking about on race day is around about 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. That should be your target. Or for some of the more weathered marathon runners, if anyone's continuing to listen and you've already done a few marathons, you want to maybe be looking at up to 90 grams per hour, because your stomachs and your systems are already ready and prepared for that level of abuse. As we're talking about race day hydration, nutrition, gels, don't sleep on your electrolytes, especially on the warmer days. Salt replenishment is just as important as everything else, although that might warrant a segment of its own. And yes, a lot of your energy gels and supplement chews may cover a little bit of sodium intake, but perhaps also think about having sodium tablets just in case it is a warm day, because it will inevitably end up giving you any end of issues, cramping, etc. But like I say, it probably warrants a more in-depth segment of its own, because it is such a interesting subject that can also, like I say, have detrimental effects to your marathon. But that's nothing to worry about when you're carb loading. Finally, and yes, we are approaching the finish line now, but let's look at what a simple carb loading example day might look like in reality. So for breakfast, it could be a nice porridge with a banana and a side of fruit juice or coffee, like I mentioned there. Follow that up with a mid-morning snack of a bagel with a nice topping, say a jam or a sweet preservative, before you tuck into a white rice with a lean protein for lunch. Another snack for late afternoon, perhaps a cereal bar and an energy drink, and then on to dinner, which could be a nice bowl of tomato pasta with grilled chicken and a bread roll, before finishing off the day with some popcorn or another light snack. Nothing there is impossible. It's all achievable regardless of how busy you might think your day is. That can all be meal prepped as well. It doesn't take particularly long on any given Sunday to do a little bit of advanced legwork. Get it ready in, say, the freezer, take it out the night before, take it to work. It's all achievable, like I say. Final thoughts and advice, though, for any first-time marathon runners. And sure, carb loading is really important, but it isn't that magic spell, that magic wand that's going to fix anything that you might have done wrong during your training, because nothing's going to replace effective, proper, thought-out, regular, consistent training. And it's certainly not going to prevent a breakdown mentally at, say, mile 25. What it does do, however, is it gives you the best possible advantage or start to your day. So remember to aim to start your carb loading at least 3 days before your event. Increase the carbs gradually while lowering your fat and fiber intake slightly. Hydrate sensibly and regularly, but most importantly, stick to what you've practiced. Nothing new and try not to panic if it starts to feel all that little bit overwhelming. Everyone else is going through the same as yourself. And just remember that you are going to look back on your marathon with so much pride that ultimately carb loading is going to be the least of your worries. But if you are worrying ahead of your marathon, just make sure to kind of maybe address some of what I have shared with you. It might all sound, as I say, overwhelming, but it's not rocket science. It is all achievable. And listen to this part a couple of times and you will easily find that it is all achievable. You can do it. But that's it for this segment. We'll maybe look like we've kind of touched on sodium intake there, electrolytes, another one. But back to the main episode. You can easily tell that was recorded quite a number of weeks ago because I totally forgot that I'd framed the whole thing around running your first marathon. The original plan was to release those on the run up to the Manchester Marathon and London Marathon, both of which are coming up. At the time of this being released though, like I say, because it's pre-recorded, it might be released after the fact of the Manchester Marathon, but before the London Marathon. Anyway, hopefully that particular segment was useful to one or two of you. Let me know what you think. And then there are several others that have been recorded off of the back of me listening to that one at the time. But like I say, it was several weeks ago, so I maybe forgotten a little bit about what was contained until recording this one and editing the piece together. But to reiterate some of what was in the segment, I think the overwhelming takeaway for anyone that hasn't run a longer distance that has required carb loading is that it's not as important as you might think, but it's also not as overwhelming as it might seem. It is easy to address. It's just adding in or subtracting out certain parts of your diet and replacing with other parts. It is really easy to achieve, and it's something that I have become more familiar with as I've run more and more marathons and experienced different issues as a result. All in all, however, that was your first returning episode, your full episode 6 of season 6. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, hopefully I'll have a fantastic guest for you in the next one. I will have a guest and they will be fantastic. I'm just not entirely sure who it's going to be at this current moment in time. We'll just have to see who's available. But you're going to love them. I'm pretty sure of that. And we'll have a great chat with them. It is, however, the usual thing, the wrap up. If you want to get in contact with myself or to the podcast page, you can DM both myself and the podcast over on Instagram. It's the .99 podcast on Instagram or Mr_Steve_runs. Just head on over there, drop us a message, and I will do my best to respond to them as soon as possible. If you want to drop me an email, I think we've still only ever had one email in the full duration of the podcast's existence. It's the.99podcast@gmail.com. And that's all one word, with numeral 99. Remember to share the podcast with your friends, family, and followers. We're available on Spotify, I think, only at the moment, although I keep getting emails to say that we're still available on Apple. Whether or not these new episodes are, I don't know. We will hopefully get everything back up and running on Apple and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. As I start rolling them back out again, I'll hopefully get them on all podcast platforms. Then finally, we still have t-shirts available. It is only the original t-shirt. I never got around to actually finalising the other design with Twisted Running. But if you do want one, you want to show your support to the podcast, or especially to Twisted Running, hop on over to Twisted Running, hit the drop down on clubs, and you can find the .99 podcast. And I think we have every colour under the sun available to us. So go show those guys some support. All the money goes straight to them. It's a fantastic brand. They've supported us pretty much from the outset, and I can't thank them enough. They're a fantastic little outfit. I say little outfit, they're actually quite sizable now, doing some amazing things. And then as a final note here, I just want to say it was really sad to see recently that the What the Fartlek podcast has announced its closure. It's coming to an end at the end of its, I think, its current season. They were so supportive of us when we first started out. They shared trailers for the podcast. They gave us feedback. They even came on the show in the case of John Pickup. So yeah, it's a shame to see them calling it a day, but I've had a fantastic time listening to those guys. They supported a lot of my training blocks, being with me on a Sunday long run when I really couldn't be bothered, and hearing some of the fantastic and hilarious stories from all of them. So I wish them all the very best with whatever comes next. They might decide that they don't want to quit in the end, or they don't want to call it a quit. So we can but hope, but I think it is the end there. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. Head on over, show them all the love and support you can. But hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed here, now that I've got the wheels in motion again, I can get a good number of episodes under my belt. We can have really good discussions with amazing people once again, and just help you guys smash amazing things by just giving you someone to listen to and waffle away in your ears when you're out on those cold, wet, miserable days when you can't be bothered, or on the sunny days. But that has been a fantastic return. I've really enjoyed being back with you once again. So until the next episode, I hope you take care. No, that's wrong. I hope you stay safe, enjoy your runs, and you will hear from me soon.